Now, heat alone will eventually cook and solidify the egg white, but often it happens too slowly to keep the egg together in a tight shape.
Because it's spreading out while it cooks.
Right. Acid, however, acts as a chemical shock to the system. When those loose protein balls of yarn hit the highly acidic water, they immediately denature, they violently unspool, and then immediately tangle up and bond tightly with each other upon contact.
So the vinegar is acting as an invisible net. It causes the outermost layer of the egg white to instantly seize up and build a solid wall of cooked protein around the yolk before the rest of the white has a chance to drift apart into the water.
Exactly.
You sacrifice a little bit of the water's neutrality to gain structural integrity.
It is a structural trade-off governed by the chemistry of protein denaturation.
And if you don't want to deal with swirling vortexes of acid water, the manual offers a totally different approach to the same ingredient. Shirred eggs. And the instruction here is incredibly straightforward. Shirred simply equals baked.
A completely different thermal environment.
You crack the eggs into a flat-bottomed ceramic dish, known as a ramekin, maybe add a splash of cream and bake them in the oven.
It is the perfect illustration of how swapping the method of heat transfer from the moist heat of poaching to the dry heat of an oven dictates a completely different textural result from the exact same biological ingredient.
So we have mastered the environment. We have controlled the fire, manipulated the sauces, and engineered the eggs. But all of this technique is usually in service of a centerpiece.
The main course.
And that requires us to understand exactly what we are applying that heat to. Applying heat to a primary protein requires understanding the actual biological machinery of the animal you are cooking.
You cannot cook a piece of meat perfectly if you do not understand how that specific muscle functioned while the animal was alive. Cooking meat is essentially the thermal manipulation of anatomical tissue.
Right. And the source addresses this immediately with a fundamental question regarding poultry. What part of a chicken is described as white meat?
A question everyone thinks they know the answer to.
We all know the answer is the breast. We know the breast is white meat and the legs and thighs are dark meat. But the text provides the biological why, and it centers on a specific molecule called myoglobin. I had never heard of this before. What is myoglobin?
Myoglobin is a specialized protein found inside muscle cells, and its primary job is to store oxygen.
Oxygen storage, okay.
Muscles that are used constantly for sustained, prolonged effort need a massive, steady, uninterrupted supply of oxygen to keep firing. Therefore, biology packs those specific muscles full of myoglobin to act as oxygen reservoirs.
So if we look at a chicken or a turkey,
The legs and thighs are the workout muscles. These birds spend all day walking, standing, scratching the dirt, and running. Those leg muscles are slow twitch muscles working continuously.
so they need lots of oxygen.
Because they are constantly engaged, they are flooded with myoglobin.
And the text explicitly states that myoglobin is heavily pigmented. It is what gives dark meat its dark reddish-brown color. So when you are looking at a raw chicken thigh, that darker, richer color isn't just a visual trait, it is the physical evidence of a highly active, oxygen-rich muscle.
Exactly. Now compare that to the breast. Chickens and turkeys do not fly very much.
Right, they just flutter around.
They use their breast muscles, which power their wings, for short, frantic bursts of energy like fluttering up to a fence post, rather than continuous sustained effort.
So they don't need the oxygen reserves.
Because these are fast-twitch muscles used infrequently, they require very little oxygen storage. Less oxygen needed means less myoglobin, which results in the pale, translucent white color of the breast meat.
And this anatomical reality translates directly to how we must cook it. The breast, lacking that myoglobin and the associated intramuscular fat, is incredibly prone to drying out and becoming chalky under high heat.
It's very delicate.
The dark meat, heavily worked and marbled with connective tissue, not only can withstand longer, slower cooking methods, it actually requires them to break down that tough tissue into gelatin. You are literally letting the anatomy dictate the recipe.
It dictates everything.
But before you even decide how to cook the meat, you have to ensure it is viable to eat. The manual outlines a sensory test for determining the freshness of raw meat.
This is a critical skill. As we discussed earlier with the invisible biological threats, you cannot see a salmonella colony. But you can detect the byproducts of advanced bacterial decay if you know what to look for.
So what are we looking for?
The manual insists that a chef must rely on their primary senses: touch, sight, and smell.
Let's break those down. First, touch. The text says the texture should spring back and the temperature should be cold. If I press my finger into a raw steak, It shouldn't leave a permanent crater. The muscle fibers should still have elasticity.
Yes, the cellular structure of the muscle should still be intact, resilient, and taut. If the meat feels mushy, yielding, or particularly if it feels slimy, that means the structural integrity of the cells is actively breaking down.
Slime is always bad.
Always. This is usually due to enzymatic action or rapid bacterial growth digesting the surface. And of course, it must feel physically cold to the touch, assuring you it hasn't been sitting in that dangerous 40-degree temperature zone.
Then sight. You are looking for good color, and explicitly not brown or green. Now, green meat is a fairly obvious red flag, but brown can be tricky, right? Because meat naturally oxidizes when exposed to air.
It says oxidize, yes.
But the text is clear. Fresh meat should look vibrant and moist, not dull, dry, and graying. Finally, we move to smell. This is the most primal warning system human beings have. The manual says there should be no sour or foul odor.
The human olfactory system is incredibly, almost miraculously sensitive to these specific volatile compounds released by decomposing proteins.
So our noses are built to detect it.
If a piece of meat smells sour or sweet in a sickly way, it means bacteria have already begun to digest the proteins and are actively off-gassing waste products. When you smell bad meat, your nose is literally detecting the exhaust fumes of a thriving bacterial colony.
That is a profoundly gross but very helpful visual. Exhaust fumes. Okay, so we've used our senses to confirm the meat is fresh. We've considered the anatomy and selected our cooking method. Now we actually cook it.
Let's get to it.
Let's pivot to beef. The source states that achieving medium doneness requires the beef to reach an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, using a digital probe thermometer is the gold standard.
It's the only way to be mathematically certain?
It is the only way to be mathematically certain of the internal thermal state. But the manual provides a fascinating old-school contingency plan. If you are on a busy line and you do not have a thermometer, how do you know what is happening in the center of that steak?
You have to rely on the visual evidence of protein denaturation. The manual suggests a technique where you insert a pointed object, like a long carving fork or a metal skewer, deep into the thickest part of the meat, pull it out, and observe the juices that flow out of the puncture wound.
The text says, dripping of juice or redness indicates that meat is still raw. Now, I want to understand the exact mechanism here. Why is the juice red when the steak is raw and clear when it is cooked? Is that blood running out of the steak?
This is perhaps the biggest misconception in all of meat cookery. It is almost never blood.
Wait, it's not blood.
The actual blood is entirely drained from the animal's circulatory system during the butchering process. That red fluid you see on your cutting board is actually water mixed with that exact same protein we just talked about, myoglobin.
Oh, wow. So the red juice is just oxygen storage protein mixed with water.
Yes. When the meat is raw, the myoglobin is highly pigmented and soluble, so the intracellular water inside the muscle is tinted a bright ruby red.
Okay, so what changes it?
However, as the internal temperature of the meat rises during cooking, the thermal energy physically alters the myoglobin. Around 140 to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, right as we hit that target for medium doneness, the myoglobin protein denatures.
It changes shape.
It structurally changes shape, it loses its ability to hold on to oxygen, and as a result, it fundamentally changes color from bright red to a pale grayish brown.
So when you pierce the meat with the carving fork, you are essentially pulling a sample of the internal environment. If red liquid comes out, it means the thermal energy hasn't penetrated deep enough to denature the myoglobin at the core. The proteins haven't fully cooked through.
Exactly.
If the juices run clear, it means the heat has successfully transformed the proteins all the way to the center.
It is a perfect example of using external observation to deduce a hidden chemical state.
Yeah.
You are reading the color of the liquid to accurately gauge the invisible temperature.
That is brilliant. It makes perfect sense now. So we've navigated the intense heat, the flash points, and the anatomical complexities of the hot kitchen. Now, we are going to take a drastic turn in our journey.
We are cooling things down.
We are leaving the flames, the smoke, and the grease fires behind, and we are entering an entirely different, highly disciplined domain. The guard manger or the cold kitchen.
The guard manger is a fascinating area because the rules of engagement shift completely.
Right.
In the hot kitchen, you are largely managing volatile thermal reactions. You are fighting the fire.
Right.
In the cold kitchen, the food is often already cooked, or it is served raw. The discipline shifts away from heat application and heavily towards structural engineering, precise knife work, aesthetic geometry, and delicate, high-impact flavor balancing.
It feels like the architectural firm of the culinary world. And nowhere is that more evident than in how the manual treats the taxonomy of salads.
Oh, salads are serious business.
When I see the word salad, I think most people just picture olive iceberg lettuce, maybe some cherry tomatoes, and bottled ranch. But the source runs through a surprising variety of distinct structural salad categories. It lists leafy, non-leafy, fruit, protein combination, cooked, and congealed salads.
It elevates the concept of a salad from a simple afterthought side dish to a complex structural category that requires specific construction techniques.
Let's look at some of these. Leafy and non-leafy are fairly self-explanatory. Fruit is straightforward. Protein salads, the text notes, refer to things like bound chicken or tuna salads, where a protein base is held together.
Right, bound with mayo usually.
But the two that really stand out to me as requiring technical skill are cooked and congealed. A congealed salad requires a chemical matrix to hold the ingredients in suspension. You are using gelatin to trap ingredients in a semi-solid state.
And this detailed taxonomy allows chefs to think modularly. A salad isn't just lettuce. It is a design matrix of textures and flavors. It can be a cooked potato salad, heavily bound with a fat emulsion, or a precisely layered fruit salad.
And the manual highlights one specific, historically significant combination salad to prove this point: the Waldorf.
The classic Waldorf.
I love that they included this specific historical detail. The Waldorf salad consists of apples, walnuts, celery, and a mayonnaise-based dressing. And the text notes it was created in 1896 at the famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City.
It is included because it is the perfect pedagogical example of a combination salad. It perfectly balances the crisp crunch of the celery and apples, the natural sweetness of the fruit, the slight tannic bitterness from the walnuts, and the rich binding fat from the mayonnaise.
It covers all the bases.
It was considered a marvel of the late 19th century cold kitchen because of how it engineered those textures together.
But whether you were making a complex historical Waldorf or a simple leafy greenside salad, you need a dressing to bring it together. And the manual breaks down the absolute foundational dressing for all cold dishes: the vinaigrette.
The mother of all dressings.
It points out that the name literally stems from the word vinegar. But the secret to a professional vinaigrette isn't just what ingredients you use. It is the strict mathematical ratio that must be adhered to.
The text explicitly states that a standard vinaigrette is generally 3 parts oil to 1 part vinegar. 3 to 1. That is not a suggestion, it is a structural requirement.
I want to dig into this because we talked about oil and water repelling each other earlier with the hollandaise sauce. Is this the exact same chemical concept?
It is highly related, yes.
Okay.
But unlike hollandaise, which is a permanent emulsion stabilized chemically by the less than an egg yolk, a basic vinaigrette is a temporary emulsion.
Meaning it won't stay mixed forever.
There is no egg yolk to hold hands with the oil and vinegar. You're relying purely on mechanical force, violent shaking, or rapid whisking to physically shatter the oil and the vinegar into microscopic droplets and force them to mingle together.
So why is the 3.1 ratio so sacred? What happens if I use a 1.1 ratio, equal parts oil and vinegar?
It fails structurally. The 3.1 ratio provides exactly enough thick, heavy, viscous oil to physically surround, coat, and suspend the sharp, watery droplets of vinegar.
So the oil has to overwhelm the vinegar.
If you have too much vinegar, like a 1.1 ratio, the oil cannot create a thick enough matrix to hold all that water. The suspension collapses almost instantly. The liquids separate aggressively back into 2 layers.
And what does that mean for the salad?
When you pour it on a salad, the delicate leaves just get soaking wet with pure, harsh acid while the oil floats away. The 3.1 ratio creates a temporary structural harmony that makes the liquid thick enough to cling to a piece of lettuce perfectly.
It is literally structural engineering applied to a liquid state. And that theme of engineering carries over directly into another major, highly precise responsibility of the guard manger: sandwich making.
Sandwich architecture, really.
At home, we view sandwiches as casual, throw-it-together food, but the manual treats them as literal architectural feats. Take the clubhouse sandwich.
The club sandwich is a masterpiece of culinary geometry and load-bearing construction.
The manual defines it as a sandwich that has at least 3 or 4 slices of bread.